Welcome to the Game Plan Coaching Podcast. Stephen Maxwell is our guest today. He's coach and match official education manager at Cricket Ireland, director of coaching across 4 Gaelic game codes, and founder of No Other Game Around. He completed his Masters at the University of Limerick with a thesis titled Do Coaches Fill Their Own Cups?, which is a big focus of our conversation today, self-care. We talk about why that is not a nice to have, it's the foundation of everything else. Stephen makes the case that the coach is the most important person in the environment, not in a self-centered way, but because if you're running on empty, everyone around you feels it too. We also pick up on 2 really memorable phrases in the conversation: mindful to mindful, and Jeff, judge effort first. Both are simple, both will stick. So, here's my conversation with Stephen Maxwell. Stephen, would you give us an introduction of what you do and tell us a bit about all the different hats that you wear?
Firstly, thanks for having me on the show, Tom. I'm a massive fan, and obviously we talked about previous guests before we started. In terms of the hat principle, I suppose my 9 to 5, so to speak, is coach and match official education manager with Cricket Ireland. I'm a researcher in terms of self-care in people, or for most of us, it's coaches. I'm a director of coaching with a Gaelic Games club in Ireland, which works across 4 separate codes. And then I suppose I'm a person, so I have hobbies myself, and coaching is probably my biggest one. And I also run a consultancy business that supports people in sport and business called No Other Game Around.
So let's rewind. Let's go back in time. Tell us a little bit, Stephen, about your journey into coaching, but also your relationship with academia. And I can tell from the way you do your work and some of the insights that No Other Game Around shares on LinkedIn and other platforms that you're connecting the dots between some of the academic work and then those practical applied experiences for coaches.
I'm 42 years of age now, 42 years young. I started coaching when I was about 14 years of age. I was a decent footballer or soccer player, and I played Gaelic Games as well. But I always loved seeing how all the different coaches operated. And I was always keen to learn, where did you come up with this drill? Where did you come up with this game? Why do you talk to players like this? And I just had a real thirst for knowledge in terms of the coaching aspect. And I suppose it supported my player development. And then when I was 16 years of age, I took on roles with summer camps. I worked with underage clubs. And then when I finished high school, I started a degree in community sports leadership in London. Thirst or my love for coaching really grew, and I gained certification across multiple sports, which really hit a button. And in terms of my thirst for knowledge, that it wasn't just my love for football. I could actually learn so much from other sports and bring it back to my own game and develop my people even quicker and through that shared learning process. And then I suppose over the years, I've constantly tried to get better by putting myself into different sporting environments, working across sports, working across multiple countries. And then I decided to go back and do a master's in the University of Limerick. I think it's 4 years ago now. I happened to be on a webinar with Phil Carney, who's a lecturer on the course, and just the way he spoke, the way he's able to hold a room, I was like, I could learn so much from this guy. So I applied for the master's. I completed it in 2 years, and I wanted to focus on something that could support everything I do. So my thesis focused on self-care and coaching, and it's really helped me, and not just how I coach, it supported me outside of coaching, how to balance my lifestyle. And obviously I'm now sharing that knowledge with everybody I meet, whether it's in sport or business. And I suppose my thirst for research continues, and I'm constantly trying to grow my business through supporting others through my research.
I feel some similarity with your journey and my journey, especially the cross-sport exploration and discovery of what other coaches are doing in different environments. I've said to a few people before that when I left football and then started working at UK Coaching and moved from a single sport into broader sport, I just realized how much I didn't know. And my brain was just lit up by seeing how the demands of the competition shapes the performance and how coaches prioritize different things, the culture of the sport, and then how that impacts on what the norms in coaching practice. And I get the feeling that there's this growing minority of people who are more and more curious about what other sports and other coaches are doing, with then the ambition to try and bring things back into their own environment. We know that lots of coaches, rightly so, are magpies and steal bits off others, and we're all influenced by those people around you. What would you say to a cynic, somebody who thinks, no, my sport's my sport, there's nothing to be learned from elsewhere because it's different? It's really different. How would you persuade somebody to lean into broadening their perspective?
Also coming into cricket, most people in cricket are very linear. You know, they don't look outside their own sport. You could say the same about those operating rugby, for example. And what I always say in terms of our coach development space is, how do you know you're a great coach? Have you put yourself into different environments? And they say, well, I've worked with this age group, I've worked with this age group. I'm like, okay, so you know the technical aspects, you know the tactical aspects, but can you adapt your coaching into another sport? Can you really challenge yourself? And I push our coaches in cricket to learn from different environments by saying, when you think you're good, you're currently with your under 16s, could you go into football or rugby with your under 16s? And can you challenge yourself to be a good coach in that environment? And putting themselves into a new environment, that challenge, they don't need to know the tactical aspects, the technical aspects, even the physical aspects. It's people development at the end of the day. And if you're able to operate within any environment and support people to grow and develop, you're going to thrive. It doesn't matter what the sport is. And there's always going to be skeptics. There's always going to be those who are very fixed-minded and do not want to grow and develop. And we see that within our own coach education. People come in, they do a level 1 course, and they don't wish to grow and develop anymore. They know everything, and they want to operate in their environment. And that's fine. That's okay. But they're not going to be massively successful. And when I say success, that's not trophies. That's developing players and developing people. And those who want to grow and develop, yes, they'll do the linear pathway, level 1, level 2, level 3, but they'll go and do CPD in their own sport. They'll go outside their own sport and they'll get CPD. That could be listening to podcasts, informal education. They could go on webinars. They could go and do a educational course within a different sport. And the learning that's within those, it might be the same message that we deliver within cricket, but because it's coming from someone else, it really hits home. And they're the coaches that thrive. They're the coaches that I want to work with. They're the coaches that players want to work with because they're going to learn and develop quicker.
Yeah. This sounds really cliche and fluffy, but maybe going and developing yourself as a coach, working in different sports, is the most athlete-centered thing that you can do, because you're ultimately equipping yourself. You're building that capability to be a better coach for them. There's a coaching friend, acquaintance, who I had the pleasure of meeting a few times before he passed away, Kevin Bowering, who in the brief exchange that we had imparted some wisdom. And he said to me that coaches at the start of their journey need courses. Coaches who are learning and developing need conferences, and experienced coaches need coffee shops. And I've thought about that statement frequently around the value of spending time with other coaches in other environments and being curious, not leading with your assumptions or knowing stuff, but going into any conversation with another coach genuinely open to what they might bring and what they might offer. I'd really like to ask you, Stephen, about your work around self-care and burnout. It's a theme that's come up a few times on the podcast. I'm going to share a provocation with you, which is deliberately provocative, and I'd love to know what you think and share some of your work within this. If you're working with a sports organisation and they had to choose between an all-Ireland title or protecting their mental health and the energy and the work-life balance of the coaching staff, what would the system really prioritise?
It's a very provocative question indeed, Tom. I suppose it depends on the environment. And there's actually a really good research paper called It Depends. it really comes back to the environment and the people operating in that environment and how they measure success. And to be honest, if you're looking after your people and you're helping to manage their time, support them in terms of their self-awareness, building their resilience, they're going to be much more successful in the first place. If your ultimate goal is purely to win trophies, you're not looking after your people. So it's going to be very short-term success. You're going to burn your people, whether that's your coaches, your administrators, your athletes, you're going to burn them out because it's very short-sighted. And if you want ultimate, sustainable, long-term success, you develop your people from the ground up. So that could be supporting them in terms of how they manage load. Ultimately, it comes back to what is the culture of coaching? It's giving. But who's the most important person? And the most important person is the coach. And if they're able to be their best self every single time they go out to coach, they're going to have a long-term environment for their athletes to grow and develop. Whereas if they're coming from meetings where high performance director or CEO is putting pressure on them to win, how can they operate at their best self? They're bringing that stress into the environment, and players can feel that, they can sense that, and that doesn't add to a really good environment. And then obviously, if the environment is not good, and that leads to inconsistencies, then the culture, which is the outcome, that suffers, and there is no trophies at the end of the day. So if you want to be a sustainable, successful environment, you've got to look after your people, and that's why self-care is so important.
So where'd you start? I asked that partly because some of my experiences at working at a club years ago, which I enjoyed so much. I got so much out of it. I learned so much. It was in the pathway, not at the sharp end with performance, but really important work in the pathway. I definitely did 6 years work in 3 when I was there. And that was just that was the nature of the role, that we were under-resourced. We didn't have enough people. So you were passionate and you cared about the athletes that you were supporting. You cared about the success of the pathway. So you just picked it up. You just did it. And I'd found myself becoming more and more and more tired just because it never ended. There was always an email or always a new thing or always something to answer. And as much as I tried as a coach to balance the scales, to think about, right, how do I recoup some of this energy, it always felt slightly out of reach because the off season was almost busier than the season. There was so much going on. So if you're a coach or if you're an organization that deploys coaches, like where's a good place to start with this work?
I suppose it comes back to why I decided to focus my research on this particular topic. And it comes back to managing expectations. And the sole reason I got involved in the research was within Gaelic Games in a particular county in Ireland, there's 16 senior head coaches. And in a particular year, 12 of them decided to step back from the sport. There's some different reasons, family changes, work changes. But the big thing was the expectations they were trying to manage by those who appointed them. And I think that's where we need to start. So if I'm a director of coaching or a director of football or a high performance director, if I'm hiring Tom today, my expectations need to align with yours and they need to be realistic. So it comes back to maybe the SMART model. So when push comes to shove in the tough end of the season, we both have an understanding of where the group is so that I'm not putting extreme pressure on you to be successful, because realistically we might be just a mid-table club or we might be trying to avoid relegation, and that I'm able to help manage you as well as you managing yourself, because we're aligned. And that's where it ultimately comes back to. So when I started as director of coaching in a GA club in Meath recently. I'm working across 4 different codes. So that's 4 different sports. And where I started was with the executives and the committee and sharing what self-care is to them, so they have a better understanding of time management, resilience, self-care, managing your own expectations. What triggers you? Why do you get frustrated if a coach is operating in a certain way? How to manage people, as an example. And once they had a better understanding, then they understood what coaches are going through. So then I could work with the coaches, put them through the same process. And then everybody has a better understanding of how they can manage people. If we look at one club coach, for example, and I have a map on my wall and I look at the different relationships they have to manage on a daily basis, and this is a volunteer coach, and he has between 12 and 20 different relationships they have to manage on a single day. It could be partners, it could be friends, parents, the athlete themselves, the leadership group, the captain, the club executive, club secretary, and their own children, for example. So self care is about how do you build a process to manage all that, which I think is really, really important. And that's where you have to start. And we try to start at the top and then work down. And obviously, you're finishing with the players, but you're supporting the coaches as well.
So top down, bottom up. So it's influencing the people who are making the decisions, and then equipping the coaches with the resources they need, the strategies to be able to do this for themselves. Buy that completely. And I would imagine if you're an organization who you're a club or you bring in coaches to do your work, and you make it really clear that part of the way you do your work is by making sure that everybody in our team has the resources they need, they're looked after as human beings. Surely you're going to recruit engaged coaches who really want to put lots into their work because they know that they're going to be looked after at the other side of it.
Hopefully is the word. And again, it comes back to expectations and clarity of communication. So if I'm operating with a team, the first thing I do at the start of the year is bring in all the parents. So I'm only working with adult athletes at the moment, but I bring in their parents, their partners, extended family in at the start of the year, and I say to them, this is how we're going to communicate over the course of the season. And we're crystal clear with how we communicate. So if your son comes home frustrated that he's not starting at the weekend, they're able to re-emphasize, well, this is how you should communicate with your coach. So we're crystal clear. It supports learning them when they're going home. So we have one or two players who don't drive, they're only 18 years of age. So I'm having an impact from the very start of the season, how that parent speaks to that player when they're going home from training or they're going home from a game, whether they've won or lost. I've made sure that the question is not, did you win, did you lose? Because that's just outcome focused. They focus on the process, okay? Did you bring what you were working on Thursday night into training, into the game? Were you able to showcase those learnings? And that's the type of questions parents are now asking. So we're supporting the players in creating that whole positive environment. And I think in any organization, clarity of communication from the outset is so important. And I made sure everybody's expectations are aligned. And not enough of us do that consistently. And then things start to build. And that's when, a player or a coach or a director might blow a gasket because they're so frustrated. And it's because communication wasn't very clear at the beginning.
When you were heavily engaged in this research and pulling things together, and you did your literature review and you looked across like work which had taken place already, and I'm thinking about the listeners who are really interested in coach self-care and coach well-being and thinking about can they do. Is there any way you would encourage people to go and read and look and research to build a clear picture for themselves around this topic?
I think it's so important, and it's one of the key outcomes of our research is go out and experiment. So go and research different papers, look at best practice for self-care or building positive relationships, and experiment, because self-care is a very individual thing. And that's really, really important to say. What works for Tom won't work for Stephen. For example, every morning at 7 a.m. I go and walk my dog, no phone, and it works for me. It gives me an opportunity to start my day on a positive note. I get a bit of exercise. I get to clear my mind. I get to maybe think about what I'd like to do with my day. And maybe that doesn't work for you in your environment. And when people are stressed, some people love to journal. Personally, I think it's too scripted. I love a blank notepad and just write down whatever's on and that works for me. So experimentation is really important in terms of what's going to work for you in your self-care. The most important thing is what gives you energy. Okay, so if your mind is full, you're losing energy. So what can help you to be mindful instead of your mind being full? And there's different ways of doing that. It could be cold shower. Some people like cold shower. Some people like to jump in the sea when it's, -1 out. But what works for you in your environment? It's about being self-aware. I have a nice few days. Work is going to be nice and easy, but in 3 weeks' time, we have a very stressful period, and we might have gains coming up. The business, we might be getting an audit. How can I prepare myself for those stressful situations? What are my triggers? How can I be my best self and experimenting with different things that may or may not work for me? And how do you do that? You look at research, you have conversations with your friends. You may find a mentor or a critical friend, and they could share, it's not them telling you what they do. It's about them sharing what they've tried in the past and what worked at a particular time for them. I think that's really important.
My goodness, I love mindful to mindful. That's genius, and that's really, really going to stick with me. And again, I hear you. Experimenting with different things that work for people is so important. I had a bit of a health challenge a few weeks ago, and I've completely lost the hearing in my left ear, and it's permanent hearing loss. And as a result of that, I get this really loud tinnitus constantly now, which to begin with has been really, really challenging because it's draining and tiring and almost quite upsetting to have this like chainsaw-like sound rattling on in my head all the time. And I've tried some hypnotherapy. It's been brilliant. I couldn't speak more highly of the person who's done the sessions with me. And I listened to some hypnosis tapes that he's recorded for me every time I go to sleep. And it's not got rid of the tinnitus. It's just diverted my attention elsewhere. But the whole process of being hypnotized, even just taking a breath in a day to slow down, change the tempo, it's been phenomenal for me. Now, I appreciate that hypnotherapy wouldn't be for everybody and it wouldn't have the same impact on everybody. But being open enough to try out different things to find what works. Someone recommended as well acupuncture as a brilliant way of just relieving stress or tension. So I hear you. I'm completely with you. I hear you is a bad use of words for somebody who's lost their hearing. But I'm completely with you, and being more aware and then being willing to try stuff out just feels logical. I think you bringing it to the front of people's minds to say, this is what you need to do, be intentional about it, because it's a skill to look after yourself. I think you need to have some knowledge to know why it's important, and then how you go about doing it. It's not just, some people will do it very naturally. It will just, but I imagine for a lot, you need some structure, some handrails to get to that point.
And then also, you might need a mentor or a friend, a critical friend, who is going to hold you accountable to being your authentic self. So when they see you being stressed, having that conversation and getting you to check back in, or helping you to reframe because you're having a difficult period. And Tom, you may have lost hearing in your left ear, but if you reframe that, I guarantee your other senses have now grown and developed, and you're more aware in different aspects than you've ever been before. Possibly.
I lean into my wife calling me to do things from upstairs and saying, I didn't hear that, sorry. That's definitely been a positive consequence of this whole situation. But you're right. I've paid more attention in different ways to different things, and it's something to work with rather than something to limit. Anyway, let's stop talking about my ear. Let's talk about the game plan. As you know, Stephen, in every episode of the podcast, I invite our guests to contribute something to our game plan. So this shared playbook of ideas, stories, experiences, research, whatever you like, really, that other coaches could learn from or be inspired by. Stephen, what are you adding for us today?
I haven't listened to previous podcasts, so I was really trying to think hard about this one. And if we're talking to coaches, because obviously it's a coaching podcast, for the coach to be aware that you are the most important person. It is not your players. It's not your backroom team. You are the most important person. And for you to be at your best, And for your players to develop quicker, you need to manage yourself first and foremost. So when you arrive, you're giving your best self consistently. And that leads to successful coaching. So for adding to the game plan, you are the most important person.
Tell us a little bit more, because I get it. I'm on board, right? I hear exactly what you're saying. I remember talking to some coaches years ago, and we were talking about athlete-centered activities, and we spoke about possibly the most athlete-centered thing you can do is think about yourself. Because if you're arriving in the best version of yourself and you've invested in your own development and you have the energy that you need, then you're going to give everything for those players in front of you. But yeah, just tell us a little bit more, Stephen, about what you mean by you're the most important person.
I suppose what it's not is coach-centered, because coach-centered is all about the coach being successful and it all being all about the coach. It's not. It's been about person-centered. And the most important thing is every coach has a life outside of coaching. So when you park up and you get out of your car, you are, whether you're aware of it or not, you're bringing baggage from the rest of your life. And it could be positive or negative. If there's a lot of stress in your life as you get out of that car, how are you managing your emotional state to go and operate and work with those players? Are you bringing frustration into your coaching? Are you bringing anger into your coaching? Because that is going to cross into the games, the drills, and how you communicate with your players. So before you get out of that car, could you use breath work? Could you use your voice notes, for example, and whatever's stressful in your life? I just had a fight with my boss and I have an 8 a.m. meeting that I don't want to be involved in. This is what I need to know. And talking through that and parking that and leaving it in the car. So when you get out of your car and you go meet and greet your players, you're your authentic, positive self. You're being consistent with your athletes. You're emotionally regulated so that you can be your best self when you coach. And I think that's what you being the most important person is.
Who does this stuff well? You don't have to name names, but have you met coaches who are really skillful at this?
Yes. And it's like being technically good. You have to train. It's like anything. You have to train, and every single one of the coaches I see who do this well are consistently training this day in and day out, because there is going to be bad days and you may not have encountered a particular type of stress before. So you have to be constantly training for this. And they're the ones that are really self-aware. And it's like sense. Common sense is not very common, and self-awareness is not very common. So you have to be consistently training this. It's like mental training. It has to be consistent. Just like your physical, your technical, your tactical. Those who do well consistently train this.
Is this something that everybody needs to be aware of, or is it just coaches who feel lots of stress?
This is for everybody. Self-care is so important, whether you're a parent, police officer, teacher, business person, working from home parent. I think everybody needs this in their life. Everybody has stressors, and how we manage. We could have the exact same stress point, and it could be a particular person that stresses. But how we manage that stress, everybody's completely different. And I think by learning something new in terms of your self-care, your awareness heightens. And then how you manage that particular situation will change. And then the outcome will be different. So it's all about developing your own process. And it leads to a healthier lifestyle and less high blood pressure and a more enjoyable lifestyle. And then you're able to manage your energy better because you have more energy because you're not under stress consistently. And who doesn't want to have an enjoyable life? We've only one. So why not enjoy it?
Yeah. I saw an old coaching friend at the weekend. His name's Jamie Pittman. Great coach, lovely guy. And we were talking about coaching. And he said he meets so many coaches who just get consumed by being stressed by their work and feel really down about it. And the energy's gone. And he said, just got to enjoy it. Part of coaching and part of it's got to be fun. So if you're dragging yourself into work every day, and you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, there's something wrong there. And yeah, it really stuck with me that we all have good days and bad days, but overall, we should be able to find real joy in the work that we do as coaches. But there can't be, I know I'm biased here, but it's a brilliant job to have. It's an awesome thing to be able to do. But you're right. There's so many coaches who struggle with this kind of stuff. If you don't mind me asking, what do you do?
So I touched on it already. So I have a German pointer called Boogie, and he keeps my energy levels up. And no matter how good a day or bad a day I'm having, he is his authentic, lovable self every single day. We go for a walk at 7 a.m. every morning. When I come home after a tough day, he's there. Dad, let's go for a walk. And he's massively helpful for me. I do have a mentor. He is from business world. He helps me be my authentic self. He holds me accountable. So when I'm stressing and I meet him for a coffee and I have a moan, he helps me reframe situations really, really well. And that's what works for me. I do not like going to see swimming. It's not for me. I'll get into a nice warm pool anytime, but it works for us.
I love the gym. I started CrossFit recently. And my wife thinks I'm absolutely bonkers, but I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning a few days a week to go and train. But it's just time for myself. I love it. It sets me up for the day perfectly, and I miss it when it's not there. Yeah, and it's been deliberate about that stuff. I think it's really important, making time for it. Super. You are the most important person going into the game plan. So, Stephen, final part of our conversation, knowing that our listeners love tangible ideas, takeaways they can go and pick up and put into their own practice. I ask every guest to share some game-changing advice. I'm actually thinking of changing this in the future to some game-changing ideas, because Craig Morris said that he wasn't in the business of giving out advice. So these might morph into some ideas for coaches to work with. Have you got any advice for coaches that they might want to try and apply or edit or just go and reflect on?
Just one I learned from my time working in the US in soccer. They say use Jeff. So judge effort first. So when you're working with players, don't focus on the outcome, focus on the process. Watching a basketball session recently, and I seen a player dribble around 3 opposition players, go for a 3-pointer and miss. And the coach focused on the miss. And I was like, how did you not see that they beat 3 players, dribbled around magnificently, their ball skills, their technical ability was first class. So what are you focused on as a coach? Is it the outcome or is it the process? Because that's how you want to be remembered as a coach. And I want to be remembered on focused on the process. And that's going to develop the players long term.
Why is focusing on the process so important, especially when you're working with younger players?
Players need to learn why. Why is it working? Why is it not working? So if we're focused on an outcome, have we brought it back to maybe if it's a shot at goal, for example? If we're focused on the ball going into the top left-hand corner, top right-hand corner, are we watching where the standing foot is? Are we watching where the body position is? Where do their shoulders finish? Where does their chest finish when they're striking the ball? And also, are we focused on what got them into that position in the first place? Was it through spatial awareness? Did they scan to see that they had time, that they were balanced, etc., etc.? So the why is so important. And when I'm coaching, I always focus on the why. This is why we're going to focus on this aspect going into this game. And the players can buy into it quicker. I
was at a gymnastics event at the start of the year, and there was a wonderful coach who was leading a session whose name escapes me now. If I'm clever and I'm editing this podcast, I'll insert his name into said place. But he was talking about some of the work he'd done with a medal-winning gymnast and just highlighted the difference between process goals, performance goals, outcome goals. And the further up that triangle you go, the less control you have as a coach. Sticking with the process and using that to build those habits, to reinforce what you're trying to achieve rather than what you did actually achieve. That just is synergy with long-term athlete development. You're a word stiff as well, Stephen, because using Jeff, we've gone from mindful to mindful, and Jeff, I've talked about process outcomes lots of times in my own coaching, but what a brilliant way to remember this and for coaches to pick up and use it. Well, thinking about language, what have you noticed when you support the process rather than the outcome? What are the words you tend to use or the questions or challenges you might set when you're working with players?
Having shared language is so important, and it's probably the most enjoyable workshop we do with no other game around is going into a club and bringing all the coaches into the room and we play a video and we go, okay, what is the language you use? And every single coach has their own language. And I'm like, okay, I'm a player. I'm going to go through under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, and you're all going to use different language to coach in the same way. How am I going to learn? How am I going to enjoy that learning experience if you're all talking to me in a different way? And I think that's so important. So the way I coach is by creating habits through cues, or some players say triggers. So by using one word in my coaching and consistently using that same word, it helps the players get into that habit or mindset of, this is what I need to do in this particular situation. So if you look at the Premiership, for example, some coaches are exhibitionists. They want to shout, scream on the sideline. Whereas I love a silent sideline, and I might just shout in one cue word to help a player reframe in that moment. And they're able to learn quicker. We're very clear on what we're trying to do. And in some cases, we get players to come up with the cues, so then they have more ownership. It's their language. And that's what's coming on from the sideline then, is the player's language. And it's short, it's sharp.
Shared language, hugely important. Can see all the benefits. I think the thing that you've lit up in my brain there is having shared language is one thing. And I think from some coaches I've worked with before, shared language is circled around the technical, tactical side of the sport. Like, how can we describe something quickly from the side that means that we've not lost any time in communication? But if as a coaching team we had shared language with the extra filter of process over outcome, judging effort first, how valuable that could be. That if we all talk about process in a similar way, we use similar words to help players recognize the effort that they're going to rather than the outcome that's achieved. That has the opportunity to build so much confidence for young people, because there's no doubt around the types of behaviors that we're rewarding or recognizing.
100%. And one practical example, Gaelic football is a very physical contact sport. So when we want our players to be technically clean when they're tackling, we keep shouting one, one, one. And what that means is take one more step so your body is aligned with the opposition player rather than reaching across to try and make a tackle, which increases the opportunity for it to be a turnover because you fell. So one means one more step.
Brilliant. Love it. Love it. Using Jeff is our advice for coaches, linking back to being the coach being the most important person. So much in this podcast for coaches to go and reflect on and try out. And I just want to reinforce that point about self-care and looking after yourself. And if you're head of coaching, leading a pathway, thinking about how can you better understand the people that you're employing, helping yourself have a better understanding of how you help them develop their time management, resilience, self-care, your empathy skills. So important if you want a high-performing and sustained coaching team. Stephen, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Tom, thanks for having me. I'm one of many guests, but can I just say, every guest you have has so much learning. So thank you for sharing through your podcast.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Stephen. He brings so much warmth and clarity to this topic and makes it feel really accessible. The mindful to mindful idea is really worth sitting with. Most coaches arrive at training carrying the weight of the day, and very few have a deliberate process for parking that in the car park before they step onto the pitch. Stephen's point is that self-care isn't bubble baths and cold water swimming. It's knowing your triggers, managing your energy, and consistently showing up as the best version of yourself for the people that you coach. And Jeff, judge effort first. Process before outcome. Something I'd encourage everybody listening to this to take into your next coaching session, especially if you work with younger players. What you recognise shapes what your players believe about themselves, and that matters more than the result on any other given day. Go and find out about No Other Game Around. More from Stephen. Links are in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and go well in your next coaching session.